Okay, let's talk about Tyrion. Sorry for my voice. I'm still trying to have it recover here. Tyrion is an interesting character because, unlike a lot of other characters who are kind of based on other things in George R. R. Martin's work or based on someone from history, Tyrion, more than anyone else, is simply a full character, pretty much taken from another story. Um, and changed very little. The story is called Under Siege, and in that story, there's an unnamed dwarf who time travels, who's big on history. He's an alcoholic. He's chess playing. He's in love with a woman with in unrequited love. He has feelings of bitterness and things like that. The Under Siege character protagonist is so clearly Tyrion. That it's you just don't see it with any of the other characters in Ice and Fire, where you're just like, oh, you took it from there. I mean, there's definitely ones where I see inspirations, like you can say, oh, the character from Unsound Variations, like, oh, that guy was interesting and dark. I see elements of him in other people. Or the Hound from Wild Cards, he feels like Skahaz, and things like this. But no, like the protagonist from Under Siege is just so Tyrion, 500%. And so I guess George really loved that character and thought he was great, and so he's essentially popped him into this story. We don't really have any historical equivalent of anyone having a dwarf relative in a royal family, or even there's not even that many examples of uh, people with physical disorders that one would think of. You kind of think of maybe Habsburg jaws or things like that, but that's largely a genetic issue. Dwarfism comes from random mutations. It's not really something that gets passed down. Some people have talked about maybe that Tyrion is a reference to maybe Richard III and his scoliosis, but Richard III's scoliosis wasn't really noticeable. And other people think maybe Claudius, the emperor, but Claudius being off mentally is largely a creation of Suetonius. It's not something that actually happened in history. And I, Claudius, the book, is historical fiction. So there's nothing really in history that even approaches Tyrion's situation. Anyway, here we are. um, Somewhere in the great stone maze of Winterfell, a wolf howled. The sound hung over the castle like a flag of mourning. Right from the beginning, you can see it's just a much more poetic sound, poetic way of writing. Tyrion chapters are the most poetic, on par with Catelyn. It's just a very different writing style. It's not simple. It's complicated. Everything has to be poetic, as we go. Tyrion Lannister looked up from his book and shivered, though the library was snug and warm. Something about the howling of the wolf took a man right out of his here and now and left him in a dark forest of his mind, running naked before the pack. These things like dark forest of his mind, running naked before the pack. It's interesting. Tyrion gets very weird around the direwolves. The direwolves don't seem to like him. He doesn't seem to like the direwolves. This is kind of forgotten about after a Game of Thrones because he stopped running into direwolves. But this is something they kind of really emphasize here, or George really emphasizes here, that he doesn't like the direwolf, and it does something to him. He definitely has Tyrion definitely has weird dreams, doesn't sleep well, and here the wolf wakes him up from this kind of weird dream. This whole kind of situation is he's waking up from a book. This is kind of mirrored later with Samwell and Samwell I, A Feast for Crows. You were establishing the character as bookish, waking up having read all night, When the direwolf howled again, Tyrion shut the heavy leather-bound cover of the book he was reading, a 100-year-old discourse on the changing of seasons by a long-dead maester. He covered a yawn with the back of his hand. His reading lamp was flickering. Its oil was all but gone. A dawn light leaked through the high windows. He had been at it all night, but there was nothing. That was nothing new. Tyrion Lannister was not much one for sleeping. Yeah, he's plagued by these dreams. He reads all night because he's academic. Here he gets this. He's reading this book on the changing of the seasons. And of course, all these books are going to get burned later. So it's kind of this interesting idea, kind of like a library at Alexandria situation where all this knowledge is going to be lost. For instance, anybody's ideas on why the seasons might change. His legs were stiff and sore, and he eased down off the bench. He massaged some life back into them and limped heavily to the table where the septon was snoring softly, his head pillowed on an open book in front of him. Yeah, we find that the septons seem to take care of the libraries. The septon at the wall also takes care of the library there. Though I don't know who took care of the library before septons came up, because septons are fairly new in Winterfell. Tyrion glanced at the title. A Life of Grand Maester Aethelmuir. No wonder. Shale, he said softly. The young man jerked up, blinking confused, the crystal of his order swinging wildly on its silver chain. I'm off to break my fast. See that you return my books to the shelves. Be gentle with the Valyrian scrolls. The parchment is very dry. Emirian's Engines of War is quite rare, and yours is the only complete copy I've ever seen. Shale gaped at him, still half asleep. Patiently, Tyrion repeated his instructions, then clapped the septon on the shoulder and left him to his tasks. And so you can kind of see that Tyrion's interests are wide. He was reading about the changing of the seasons, something more science related. He would then has these Valyrian scrolls, perhaps something more history related, and then he's dealing with war, something more military science kind of thing. So, Tyrion is a Renaissance man. Outside, Tyrion swallowed a lungful of cold morning air and began his laborious descent of the steep stones and corkscrewed around the exterior of the library tower. It was slow going. The steps were cut high and narrow, and his legs were short and twisted. Already George is kind of contradicting himself where, Tyrion, he's having a tough time going downstairs because his legs were short and twisted, but with Jon, he's a gymnast dwarf, so, perhaps both are possible, but they seem kind of weird, right? The rising sun had not yet cleared the walls of Winterfell, but the men were already hard at it in the yard below. Sandor Clegane's rasping voice drifting up to him. The boy is a long time dying. I wish you would be quicker about it. Now this is very interesting because at first you kind of read this and you're like, oh, Sandor Clegane, what a jerk. I wish you would be quicker about dying. But it's also like you could view it another way, that he feels bad for the boy and he wants him to end his suffering in a sort of moment of mercy. This is actually how supposedly what drunk Robert thinks. This is what Jaime thinks. It's pretty common that everybody believes that Bran doesn't have any chance of surviving, and that even if he does, his life isn't worth living, and so that he should, his misery should end. So it's not necessarily, the Hound isn't necessarily being cruel here. But Tyrion glanced down and saw the Hound standing with young Joffrey as squires swarmed around them. And then Joffrey says, at least he dies quietly, the prince replied. It's the wolf that makes the noise. I can scarce sleep last night. And here's the thing, Joffrey doesn't care that the boy might be in pain. He's like, as long as it doesn't affect him, he's dying quietly. That's all he cares about. The wolf is the one that's keeping him up. This, of course, comes back later where in A Storm of Swords, we have this very weird idea in Tyrion's mind that Joffrey sent the cat's paw, which relies on kind of retconning this entire scene, that suddenly Joffrey is the one interested in delivering mercy, But anyway, Clegane casts a long shadow across the hard-packed earth, and his squire lowered the black helm around his head. I could silence the creature if it please you. That's the other thing. It's not even Joffrey's idea. It's the Hound's idea. The Hound wants to deliver mercy, and well, here he's offering to kill the wolf, but he's also like he's the one wanting the boy to die. He said through an open visor. His boy placed the longsword in his hand. He tested the weight, slicing the cold air in the morning. Behind him, the yard rang to the clangor of steel on steel. The notion seemed to delight the prince. Send a dog to kill a dog, he exclaimed. Winterfell is so infested with wolves, the Starks would never miss one. Now, I do have to say that, Joffrey, we know that Joffrey is absolutely a psychotic ass. Like that's, but in this exchange, I think it's funny rereading it because Joffrey is not actually the one who is being that much of a jerk in this exchange. Tyrion is actually being the jerk. I don't know if that's the intention of the author, but I always thought this was funny because it's Sandor who wants the boy to die. And then the prince just says, the wolf is making a lot of noise. And then the hound says, I could kill him. And Joffrey is like, that would be really funny, a dog killing a dog. And then he just kind of says, the Starks wouldn't miss it. He's wrong. But then this is Tyrion's reply to it. Tyrion hopped off the last step into the yard. I beg to differ, nephew, he said. The Starks can count past 6, unlike some princes I might name. Now that's a pretty big insult to give to Joffrey. Joffrey had the grace to at least blush. Then Sandor comes in, making fun of Tyrion. A voice from nowhere. He peered through his helm, looking this way and that. Spirits in the air. The prince laughed, as he always laughed at his bodyguard. When his bodyguard did this mummer's farce, Tyrion was used to it. Down here. So far, it's kind of Sandor as the one being a jerk. The tall man peered down at the ground and pretended to notice him. The little Lord Tyrion, he said. My pardons, I did not see you standing there. Pretty shocking actually for the Hound to be so insubordinate or be so insulting to Tyrion. I'm in no mood for your insolence today, Tyrion turned to his nephew. Joffrey, it's past time you called on Lord Eddard and his lady to offer them your comfort. Joffrey looked as petulant as only a boy prince can look. What good will my comfort do them? None, Tyrion said, yet it's expected of you. Your absence has been noted. Now, if you know anything about teenagers, these sorts of interactions are awkward. It's kind of something that, yes, someone not giving your condolences to your son, like getting injured. Yeah, sure, it's noted, but it's also like this is a teenager, and they're awkward and weird and don't understand social norms and stuff like this. So it's kind of also really understandable that Joffrey didn't do this. But of course it's played like, Joffrey's just a jerk. The Stark boy is nothing to me. I cannot abide, and I cannot abide the wailing of women. So this is a pretty jerky response. Then Tyrion Lannister reached up and slapped his nephew hard across the face. The boy's cheek began to redden. I mean, that's escalating pretty quick, I have to say. He goes straight to striking Joffrey. One word and I'll hit you, Tyrion said, and I'll hit you again. I'm going to tell mother, Joffrey exclaimed. Tyrion hit him again. Now both cheeks flamed. You tell your mother, Tyrion told him, but first you get yourself to Lord and Lady Stark and fall to your knees in front of them, and you tell them how sorry you are and that you're at their service if there's the slightest thing you can do for them, and there's in this desperate hour, and that all your prayers go to that with them. Do you understand? Do you? It's weird that this has fallen to Tyrion to tell Joffrey to go give condolences to the Starks. Like, why hasn't Robert done this? Why hasn't Cersei done this? Like, what, why haven't they been like, this is like very regular, but somehow it's Tyrion that cares about this. So it's very funny. Tyrion comes down and decides to beat up the Joffrey over Joffrey. Yes, Joffrey later we find out is psychotic, but at the same time here, Joffrey's just being a teenager, and Tyrion comes in and starts striking him. The boy looked as if he was going to cry. Instead, he managed a weak nod. Then he turned and fled headlong from the yard, holding his cheek. Tyrion watched him run. Not even trying to convince. He didn't even try to convince him very much. Went straight to hitting him. So I do kind of think Tyrion comes off as a real jerk in this scene. But I think because we're supposed to side with the Starks, and Joffrey's already shown himself to be a jerk, that we're supposed to be like, yeah, he got it. A shadow fell across his face. He turned to find Clegane looming over him overhead like a cliff. His soot dark armor seemed to blot out the sun. He had lowered the visor of his helm. It was fashioned in the likeness of a snarling black hound, fearsome to behold. This black hound helmet is something that's borrowed from Wild Cards, where there is a character called the Hound in it who has a hound-shaped helmet. Though Sandor himself, with the half face that's burned, comes from Breton Braith from Dying of the Light, who has the same thing. But Tyrion had always thought it was a great improvement over Clegane's hideously burned face. So George R. Martin's taken these two elements from two different stories and kind of put it together. Clegane has a very different character from both of them. He's nothing like Breton Braith, and he's nothing like the Hound from Wild Cards, but nonetheless, the physical aspects are there. The prince will remember that, little lord, the Hound warned him. The helm turned his laugh into a hollow rumble. I pray he does, Tyrion Lannister replied. If he forgets, be a good dog and remind him. He glanced around the courtyard. Do you know where to find my brother? Breaking fast with the queen. Ah, Tyrion said. He gave Sandor Clegane a perfunctory nod and walked away as briskly as his stunted legs would carry him, whistling. He pitied the first knight to try the Hound today. The man did have a temper. A cold, cheerless meal. So, obviously this Joffrey pissing off, Tyrion pissing off Joffrey and Joffrey pissing off Tyrion is going to come back later, all the way into a storm of swords. But, here it is. A cold, cheerless meal had been laid out in the morning room of the guest house. Jaime had sat at the table with Cersei and the children, talking in low, hushed voices. Is Robert still in bed? Tyrion asked as he seated himself uninvited at the table. His sister peered at him in the same expression of faint distaste she had worn since the day he was born. The king has not slept at all, she told him. He is with Lord Eddard. He has taken their sorrow deeply to heart. He has a large heart, our Robert, Jaime said with a lazy smile. This is a joke because he's saying that Robert is fat. There's very little that Jaime took seriously. Tyrion knew that about his brother and forgave it. During all the terrible long years of his childhood, only Jaime had ever shown him the smallest measure of affection or respect. And for that, Tyrion was willing to forgive him most anything. Retconned a little because we find out that there are other members of his family that are fine to Tyrion. We hear nothing about his, Aunt Jenna or his Uncle Gary. So, maybe he's meaning just his nuclear family of Tywin, Cersei, and Jaime. But, um, it's we. All the Lannisters don't seem that bad, So I don't know. A servant approached. Bread, Tyrion told him, and two of those little fish, and a mug of that good dark beer to wash it down. Oh, and some bacon. Burn it until it turns black. The man bowed and moved. Tyrion turned back to his siblings, twins, male and female. They looked very much the part this morning. Now, I suppose if there's any confusion when you're going from the previous chapter, which is Bran, where you find the mirror looking people that look the same, and here we find that the twins, male and female. There's at this point no confusion that they about who is in the tower, but still, in the last chapter they hadn't given their names. Both had chosen a deep green that matched their eyes. Their blonde curls were all a fashionable tumble, and gold ornaments shone at wrists and fingers and throat. Tyrion wondered what it would be like to have a twin, and he decided that he would rather not know. Bad enough to face himself in a looking glass every day. Another hymn and a thought of dreadful. Another hymn was a thought too dreadful to contemplate. Now, there are some fan theories that Tyrion was a chimera, which is when you actually do have a twin, and the two masses of cells merge together in the womb, and when you see, chimeras are able to have different physical features on different sides of their body. So, for instance, two different colored eyes. And Tyrion has two different colored eyes. So this line here is kind of, fans kind of say, oh, maybe Tyrion did have a twin and they merged together in the chimera sense, and that's why he has the two different eye color, the two different eyes. Prince Thomas spoke up. Do you have news of Bran, Uncle? I stopped by the sick room last night, Tyrion announced. There was no change. The maester thought that a hopeful sign. I don't want Brandon to die, Tommen said timorously. He was a sweet boy, not like his brother. But then Jaime and Tyrion were somewhat less than peas in a pod themselves. Lord Eddard had a brother named Brandon as well, Jaime mused. One of the hostages murdered by Targaryen. It seems to be an unlucky name. Referencing Brandon and him strangling himself. Not so lucky as all that, surely. The servant brought his plate. He ripped off a chunk of black bread. So he says, this wasn't a deal of luck, is what Tyrion is implying. Cersei was studying him warily. What do you mean? Tyrion gave him a crooked smile. Why, only that Tommen may get his wish. The maester thinks the boy may yet live. He took a sip of beer. So it's weird that Tyrion has this sort of suspicious nature, because at first you think he's saying that he's accusing them of murders in that sense it wasn't unlucky, but now he's saying it's not so unlucky because Bran might actually live. Seems like a save because it's still pretty unlucky to fall off a tower and break your spine, but nonetheless, we get this element that Tyrion, for some reason, already suspects his siblings of doing something. Myrcella gave a happy gasp, and Tommen smiled nervously. But it was not the children Tyrion was watching, so he's watching the reactions because he thinks something's up. The glance that passed between Jaime and Cersei lasted no more than a second, but he did not miss it. Then his sister dropped her gaze to the table. That is no mercy. These northern gods are cruel to let a child linger in such pain. What were the maester's words? Jaime asked. The bacon crunched when he bit into it. Tyrion, the bacon already. He's already got bacon. They came back with the bacon. That was some fast cooked bacon. Tyrion chewed thoughtfully for a moment and said, "He thinks that if the boy were going to die, he would have done so already, and it's been 4 days with no change." Incredible scientific assessment there. Incredible medical assessment from Lewin. Will Bran get better, Uncle? Little Marcella asked. She had all of her mother's beauty and none of her nature. His back is broken, little one, Tyrion told her. The fall shattered his legs as well. They keep him alive with honey and water. Again, we get these ideas of how to keep things alive. How to keep the direwolves alive, the baby direwolves alive. All this hint of how do you keep something helpless alive? Or he'd starve to death. Perhaps if he wakes, he'll be able to eat real food, but he will never walk again. If he wakes, is that likely? The gods alone know. The maester only hopes. He chewed some more bread. I would swear that wolf of his is keeping the boy alive. An interesting little statement. We hear the same sorts of things with dragons later with regards to like Aenys and stuff, like the dragons, the animal telepathic link also somehow creating some sort of like bio link and will to live kind of stuff. But or maybe he's joking that he's keeping out people that might want to kill Bran. The creature is outside his window day and night, howling. Every time they chase it away, it returns. The maester said it closed the window once, but it shut out the noise, and Bran seemed to weaken. So there it is. That it's this weird bio link. Then he opened again, and his heart beat stronger. The queen shuddered. Is there something unnatural about those animals? She said, are they dangerous? I will not have any of them coming south with us. Jaime said, you'll have a hard time stopping them, sister. They follow those girls everywhere. Tyrion started on his fish. Are you leaving soon then? Not near soon enough, Cersei said. Then she frowned. Are we leaving? She echoed. What about you? Gods, don't tell me you're staying here. Tyrion shrugged. Benjen Stark is returning to the Night's Watch with his brother's bastard. I have a mind to go with them to see this wall we have heard so much of. Jaime smiled. I hope you're not thinking of taking the black on us, sweet brother. Tyrion laughed. What, me celibate? The whores would go begging from Dorne to Casterly Rock. No, I just want to stand on the top of the wall and piss off the edge of the world. Cersei stood abruptly. The children don't need to hear this filth. Tom and Marcella, come. She strode briskly from the morning room, her train and her pups trailing behind her. Kind of the irony that Cersei is like, oh, I don't want to hear this filth when she's, doing some of the most filthy acts. Jaime Lannister regarded his brother thoughtfully with his cool green eyes. Stark will never consent to leave Winterfell with his son lingering in the shadow of death. By the way, I'm actually surprised that more individuals wouldn't want to go see the wall. Tyrion's the only one. And it's not like we hear about other Lannister guards or any tales or anything like that. You'd think after traveling so long, it's only 3 more weeks to the wall that you'd want to see, that you'd want to have. You'd have some other characters wanting to see the wall. Even the king himself, like Robert himself. Why wouldn't you want to see the wall? But only Tyrion. Almost hard to believe, almost hard to believe. He will if Robert commands it, and Robert will command it. There is nothing Lord Eddard can do for the boy in any sense. He could end his torment, Jaime said. I would if it were my son. It would be a mercy. So here we hear this line again. I mean, and the mercy is just a major theme of Ice and Fire. It appears over and over and over again, especially in the Arya story. But we hear later about the wildlings believing in mercy for children, and it's kind of a joke. And of course, this comes back as well with Ned getting his head cut off and the mercy of it. There's a dark irony to all of the mercy. Is what George is constantly saying, that people use the word mercy when they really want to say murder. But nonetheless, we know that the Catspaw is going to be talking about how it's a mercy later on, and you're supposed to obviously suspect Jaime throughout this book, and only when we get to the next book is he sort of absolved. But yeah, I suppose in the grand scheme, if everybody's using the word mercy, it's really not much of a connection, And he says, I would advise putting that suggestion to Lord Eddard, sweet brother. He would not take it kindly. Even if the boy lives, he'll be a cripple, worse than a cripple, a grotesque. Give me a good, clean death. Now, of course, he's speaking directly to Tyrion, So of course, Tyrion is going to take this a certain way. Tyrion replied with a shrug and accentuated the twist of his shoulder. Speaking for the grotesques, he said, I beg to differ. Death is so terribly final, while life is full of possibilities. Jaime smiled. You are a perverse little imp, aren't you? Oh, yes, Tyrion admitted. I hope the boy does wake. I'd be most interested in hearing what he might have to say. And so right there, Tyrion again is implying that he suspects something. His brother's smile curdled like sour milk. George uses that line a lot. Smiles curdling. Tyrion, my sweet brother, he said darkly, there are times when you give me cause to wonder whose side you're on. Tyrion's mouth was full of bread and fish. He took a swallow of strong black beer and washed it down and grinned up wolfishly at Jaime. Why, Jaime, my sweet brother, you wound me. You know how much I love my family. Yeah, so short, interesting, fun beginning to Tyrion. Tyrion is a real dick, but at the same time, everyone around him are dicks too. And so this is just kind of where we're at with it. But it's a fun little introduction to him. Very brief, breezy chapter that goes by so quick. But yeah, pretty good. Already kind of retconning things, even though we're in the very first chapters. But nonetheless, it is it's very good at establishing who the Lannisters are quite quickly, and getting us a sense of their personality and their relationships. A little tell, not show, with regards to Tyrion just saying that, he loved his brother because his brother was kind to him. But other than that, I think it's an excellent chapter. Anyway, on to other things. Thanks for watching.